People like you don't belong in a neighborhood like this. This house isn't meant for people like you. Those were the exact words HOA Karen said to me in broad daylight right in front of the entire neighborhood. She thought she could humiliate me while forcing me to sell my rental house cheap to her precious son who was moving in and would strike it big, owning his piece of real estate. But what she didn't know was this. I don't just know how to sit in contracts, I also know how to hide things. That would make her son pay 100 times the price. Don't blink. When Thafus bill lands in the HOA prince's hands, you'll understand why she should never have underestimated someone like him. I was crouched down by the front porch of my rental property on Maple Street, tightening a loose railing when I heard the sharp click of high heels on concrete. The sound had that distinct rhythm of someone who believed the world owed them attention. I didn't need to look up to know it was Regina Blackthorne, though everyone in Riverside Meadows just called her Karen. As the HOA president, she had made it her mission to patrol the neighborhood like some kind of suburban general, armed with a clipboard, a measuring tape, and an attitude that could cut glass. Excuse me, her voice dripped with kind of fake politeness that immediately put you on guard. I straightened up and turned around to face her. She stood there in her perfectly pressed blazer, looking like she had just stepped out of a real estate magazine, complete with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Behind her stood a younger man, probably in his late 20s, with decent sharp features, but none of her confidence. This had to be Dylan, the son I'd heard about from other neighbors. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Regina Blackthorne, president of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. She extended her hand, but something about the gesture felt more like a challenge than a greeting. Mac Henderson, I replied, giving her hand a brief shake. Her grip was firm, calculated, the kind of handshake that was meant to establish dominance rather than build rapport. I own this property. I gestured toward the house behind me, a modest two-story colonial that I had purchased 3 years ago as a rental investment. It wasn't the fanciest house on the block, but it was well-maintained and provided a steady income from my tenant, Tom Martinez, who worked at the local auto shop and had never missed a rent payment. Yes, about that. Regina's smile grew wider, but somehow colder. I've been meaning to have a conversation with you about your property management style. She glanced around the yard with the kind of expression someone might reserve for a crime scene. You see, Riverside Meadows prides itself on maintaining certain standards. We're not just any neighborhood. We're a community of professionals, families who understand the importance of property values and neighborhood character. The way she emphasized professionals made it clear she had already decided I didn't fit into that category. Dylan shifted beside his mother, stuffing his hands deeper into his pockets. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. But Regina seemed oblivious to his discomfort. She was too busy building up to whatever point she was trying to make, and I could sense this conversation was about to take a turn I wasn't going to like. Here's the thing, Mac, she continued, pulling out a folder from her oversized purse. I've been documenting some concerns at Booth's property. Nothing personal, you understand. Just doing my job as HOA president to ensure everyone follows the community guidelines. She opened the folder with theatrical flair, revealing what looked like photographs, printed demos, and official-looking documents. The grass height violations, the improper trash can placement, unauthorized exterior modifications, the tenant's vehicle that doesn't meet our aesthetic standards. It adds up, Poxrias, Enders, A2R come like tonum rostriacid. Is this right? Right, I felt my jaw tighten. Tom's truck was old but reliable, and there was nothing in the HOA bylaws about vehiculicities. The grass was well maintained, maybe half an inch over what their ridiculous guidelines specified, but nothing that warranted this kind of attention. I wasn't aware there were any serious issues, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice level. If you have specific concerns, I'm happy to address them. Oh, but there are serious issues. Regina's voice took on a sing-on quality that made my skin crawl. 15 violatiansto, be exact, each one carrying a fine of, let's see. She made a show of flipping through pages. Between $2,000 and $5,000 each, you're looking at roughly $50,000 in penalties. She paused to let that number sink in. Unless, of course, we can work out some kind of arrangement. That's when Dylan finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom, maybe we should. Regina cut him off with a sharp look that could have frozen water. Dylan's been looking for his first home, she continued as if he hadn't spoken. Something modest, to get him started in the real estate market. This place would be perfect for him. Not too big, not too expensive. She gestured around, their property with the casual air of someone already mentally redecorating. I'm not looking to sell, I said firmly. Though my mind was racing through the implications of those alleged violations. $50,000 in fines would be financially devastating, especially if they were legitimate. But something about this whole situation felt exaggerated, too convenient, too perfectly timed. Well, that's unfortunate, Regina replied, her mask of politeness finally starting to slip because Dylan has his heart set on this particular house. And frankly, between you and me, I'm not sure someone in your situation is equipped to handle the financial responsibilities of property ownership in a community like ours. The words hung in the air like a slap. This wasn't just about HOA violations or her son's housing needs. This was about power, about putting me in my place, about showing the neighborhood that she could make people disappear when they didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. But what Regina Blackthorne didn't know was that I wasn't just some random guy who happened to own a rental property. I was a software engineer who specialized in automated billing systems, someone who understood the fine print of contracts better than most lawyers. And I had been planning for a situation exactly like this for months, ever since I first noticed her measuring my grass with a ruler and taking photographs of me trash cans. When Karen handed me that list of 15 violations, she had no idea she had just walked into a trap I'd been preparing since the day I first saw her hostile glares across the street. Because while she was busy plotting to steal my house, I had been busy discovering something very interesting about her own property records from her time in Hillcrest, something that would make her think twice about playing games with people she considered beneath her. The official HOA violation notice arrived in my mailbox 3 days later, complete with certified mail stickers and legal-looking letterhead that screamed, "We mean business." I sat in my kitchen that morning, coffee growing cold as I read through 15 pages of the most ridiculous nitpicking I'd ever seen. Grass height exceeding 2.5 in by approximately 0.75 in, trash receptacle positioned 17 in from curb instead affected, 18 in unauthorized installation of decorative garden stones without HOA approval. Each violation came with time-stamped photographs that looked like they'd been taken by a private investigator, complete with measuring tools placed strategically in every shot for scale. What made it even more surreal was the clinical precision of it all. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment power trip. Karen had been documenting everything with the methodical patience of someone building a legal case. I found myself almost impressed by the sheer dedication to pettiness until I realized what it meant. This woman had been planning to force me out for months, maybe longer. The question was, why me and why now? I was about to find out that Karen's ambitions went far beyond just acquiring cheap real estate for her son. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for that Thursday evening, and Karen made sure every homeowner in the neighborhood knew about it. She went door to door personally, clipboard in hand, explaining how she needed community support to address serious violations that threatened property values for everyone. By Wednesday afternoon, I started noticing the change in how my neighbors looked at me. Mrs. Patterson, who usually waved from her garden, suddenly found her roses fascinating whenever I walked by. The Johnsons stopped making eye contact tenderly. It was like being slowly erased from the social fabric of the neighborhood, one awkward interaction at a time. Tom, my tenant, called me that evening, sounding genuinely worried. "Mac, I don't know what's going on, but that HOA lady has been by here 3 times this week. She keeps asking about my work schedule, when I leave for work, when I get home. Yesterday she wanted to know if I was planning to stay here, if I might be looking for somewhere else to live." His voice carried that particular strain of some man caught in the middle of something they didn't understand. "She's not exactly threatening, but she's got this way of talking that makes you feel like you're already in trouble for something you haven't done yet. Should I be worried about my lease?" I assured Tom thought his lease was rock solid and that Karen's visits were part of her pressure campaign against me, not him. But privately I was furious. Going after a tenant who had nothing to do with our dispute was crossing a line that revealed just how far Karen was willing to go. She wasn't just trying to buy my house cheap. She was systematicalist in my ability to maintain it as a rental property, attacking my income stream and my tenant's peace of mind as part of her strategy. The board meeting itself was a masterclass in neighborhood politics and public manipulation. Karen had arranged the living room furniture in her house to create a tribunal-like atmosphere with the 5 board members seated behind a long folding table facing rows of chairs for the audience. About 20 neighbors showed up, which in a community of 60 homes represented a pretty solid turnout for what should have been a routine administrative meeting. Karen presented her case with polished confidence of someone who had rehearsed every word using a PowerPoint presentation that must have taken hours to prepare. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're dealing with here isn't just one property owner's disregard for community standards." She began clicking through slides of my alleged violations, with the dramatic flair of a prosecutor presenting evidence of a serious crime. "This is about preserving the character and property values that make Riverside Meadows the desirable community we all chose to live in. When we allow standards to slip, when we make exceptions for people who don't share our commitment to excellence, we're essentially telling the entire neighborhood that our collective investment doesn't matter." But here's where Karen made her first critical mistake. In her enthusiasm to paint me as the neighborhood villain, she revealed information that no HOA president should have had access to. She mentioned my income, my employment history, even details about my mortgage that could only have come from sources that had nothing to do with legitimate HOA business. She talked about my transient lifestyle and questioned whether someone who job-hopped between tech companies could be trusted to maintain long-term property investments in a stable family community. As I sat there listening to her dissect my life for the entertainment of my neighbors, I realized that Karen hadn't just violated my privacy. She had revealed the depth of her investigation into my background, an investigation that went far beyond anything related to grass height or trash can placement. This wasn't about HOA violations. This was about Karen deciding that I did belong in her version of suburban paradise, and she was willing to abuse her position to make that happen. There our breakthrough came when Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor, who lived 2 houses down, quietly approached me after meeting. "I have security cameras that cover part of your property line," she whispered, glancing around to make Sereno one was listening. "Last week I saw Karen and some man I didn't recognize measuring and photographing your house at 11:30 at night. They had flashlights and some kind of clipboard. I thought it was strange, but after tonight's meeting I think you should see the footage." Her eyes held a mixture of concern and quiet outrage that told Mekarin's campaign was starting to backfire with at least some of the neighbors. That night, I sat in my home office staring at Mrs. Chun's security footage on my laptop screen. There was Karen, clear as day, conducting what looked like a professional property assessment in the middle of the night, with someone who was not a member of the HOA board. They were measuring, photographing, and taking notes with the systematic thoroughness of people preparing an appraisal. But what caught me attention was something else entirely. Karen had been so focused on documenting my property that security cameras work both ways, and her midnight activities had revealed something about her property situation that she probably didn't want anyone to discover. But what Karen Blackthorne didn't realize was that while she was busy playing neighborhood detective, I had been doing some investigating of my own. And what I discovered about Herpest and Hillrest was about to change the entire dynamic of our little suburban war. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting from hell, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I called Karen and told her I was ready to surrender. "You win," I said into the phone, letting just the right amount of defeat creep into my voice. "I can't fight the fines. I can't deal with the neighborhood drama, and frankly, I just want this nightmare to end. Dylan still wants the house. We can work something out." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long he thought she might have hung up. But then I heard what sounded distinctly like a victory lap happening in Karen's living room. "Well, Mac, I have to say, I'm pleased you've come to your senses," she replied, though I could practically hear her trying to contain her glee. "This is the best outcome for everyone involved. Dylan has been so excited about the possibility of owning his first home, and I think you'll find that selling to a neighbor creates much less complication than dealing with outside buyers who might not understand or community standards." The subtext was clear. Sell to us or face months of continued harassment disguised as HOA enforcement. Within 24 hours, Karen had arranged for us to meet at the office of her preferred real estate attorney, Jennifer Walsh, who turned out to be someone I'd known since college, but hadn't seen in years. Jennifer greeted me with what appeared to be professionality but felt slightly cool, which was perfect for what I needed. "Mac, I have to advise you that accepting an offer this far below market value might not be in your best interests," she said in front of Karen and Dylan, frowning at the paperwork with obvious concern. "Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this sale at 180 when comparable properties in your neighborhood are selling for closer to 280,000? Karen jumped in before I could answer, clearly worried that Jennifer might talk me out of the deal. "Now, Jennifer, I think Mac understands his unique circumstances. Given the HOA violations and the potential legal complications, I'd say we're offering him a very fair price for a quick, clean sale. Sometimes it's better to cut your lasers and move on rather than drag things out in court." She had that practiced tone of someone who was used to getting her way through a combination of legal intimidation and social pressure. Dylan sat quietly through most of the discussion, occasionally nodding when his mother made a point, but otherwise seeming content to let her handle things. He struck me as genuinely excited about home ownership, which almost made me feel bad about what was coming next almost. Because while Dylan might have been an innocent pawn in his mother's game, Karen had made this personal when she decided to attack my tenant and invade my privacy. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. "I just want this over with," I said, pulling out my phone and pretending to check my bank account. "The stress is killing me, and I've got other properties I need to focus on. Let's just sign the papers and move forward." What Karen didn't know was that Jennifer and I had spent 3 hours the previous evening crafting a sales contract that looked standard but contained several very special provisions hidden in the technical appendices. The beauty of modern smart home technology is that most people don't bother to read theft and print about integrated systems and automated service agreements. The signing ceremony turned into something that resembled a small wedding reception thanks to Karen's theatrical approach to what should have been a simple business transaction. She had hired an actual photographer to document Dylan's journey to home ownership, complete with posette shots of him signing documents and shaking hands with everyone in the room. She even brought champagne and insisted on making a toast to new beginnings and community harmony. The photographer snapped pictures of Karen and Dylan holding the house keys like they just won the lottery, which in Karen's mind they probably had. "I'm so proud of you, honey," Karen gushed, hugging Dylan while the photographer captured every moment. "Your first house and in such a wonderful neighborhood. This is going to be the foundation of your entire future." She turned to me with what I'm sure she thought was a gracious smile. "And Mac, I hope there are no hard feelings. Sometimes these property disputes get a little heated, but in the end, everyone gets what they need." The condescending tone made it clear Thatch viewed this as a complete victory, a successful campaign to remove an undesirable element from her perfect suburban kingdom. Jennifer handed over the final paperwork with what appeared to be reluctant professionalism. "Congratulations, Dylan, you're now the proud owner of 1247 Maple Street. Just remember that all the integrated smart home systems come with the house, so you'll want to familiarize yourself with the user agreements and service terms." She glanced at me with what looked like concern, but was barely contained amusement. "Mac, I hope you know what you're doing." As we left the attorney's office, Karen was practically glowing with satisfaction. She spent the entire walk to the parking lot outlining her plans for helping Dylan settle into the neighborhood properly and talking about though. This whole experience had really brought them closer together as a family. Dylan nodded along, clearly happy to have made his mother proud while achieving his goal of home ownership. Neither of them bothered to ask about the technical specifications of the smart home package they'd just inherited, or why the monthly service agreements were structured as escalating prime packages rather than fixed-rate utilities. That evening, I sat in my temporary apartment across town, watching the real-time data from the integrated IoT sensors I had installed throughout 1247 Maple Street over the past 6 months. Motion detectors, smart thermostats, water flow monitors, lighting systems, security cameras, air quality sensors. Every device connected to a central billing system would begin calculating occulent fees in exactly 30 days. Dylan had the keys to his new house. But what hadn't realized was that every time he turned on a light, every time he adjusted the temperature, every time he used the premium water filtration system or activated the AI-powered security features, a digital meter was running, calculating costs at rates that would make luxury hotel concierge services look like budget options. The 30-day grace period was about to begin, and Dylan had no idea that his dream home was about to become the most expensive education in contract law he'd ever receive. Dylan moved into 1247 Maple Street on a crisp Saturday morning in October, and I have to admit, watching him experience homeownership for the first time was almost enough to make me feel guilty about what was coming. He spent the entire weekend exploring every room, testing every switch, marveling at the smart home features like a kid who'd been given the keys to a candy store, the automated lighting system that adjusted to his daily routine, the premium water filtration that delivered crystal-clear drinking water, the AI-powered climate control that learned his temperature, the state-of-the-art security system with facial recognition technology. To Dylan, it probably felt like he was living in the future. Karen, meanwhile, had transformed from neighborhood enforcer into proud mother and community champion practically overnight. She spent the first week after the sale conducting what could only be described as a victory tour through Riverside Meadows. I heard from Mrs. Chen that Karen had knocked on every door in the neighborhood, explaining how she had successfully resolved the property dispute and helped a young professional find his first home, while maintaining community standards. She framed the whole situation as an win outcome that proved the HOA system worked when people were willing to be reasonable and put community interests ahead of personal ego. "I'm just so proud of how this all worked out," Karen told anyone who would listen, including the cashier at the local grocery store who hadn't asked for her life story. "Dylan is such a responsible young man, and having him in the neighborhood is going to be wonderful for property values. Plus, it sends a message that our community standards mean something." The subtext was clear. She had successfully removed an element and replaced him with someone who belonged in her vision of suburban perfection. What made Karen's victory lap even more entertaining was how she documented Dylan's every move during those first few weeks. She created a photo album on Facebook called Dylan's First Home Journey and posted daily updates of Booth's homeowner milestones, pictures of him mowing the lawn for the first time, videos of him programming the smart thermostat, a time-lapse sequence of him organizing his garage. She even hired the same photographer from the contract signing to create what she called a professional documentary about Dylan's transition to home ownership, complete with interviews about his hopes and dreams for the future. Dylan, for his seemed genuinely happy and blissfully unaware of the financial time bomb he was living on top of. He threw himself into the homeowner role with enthusiasm that was actually kind of touching. He researched the optimal settings for every smart device, programmed custom lighting scenes for different times of day, and even upgraded his internet device to take full advantage of the home's integrated connectivity features. He hosted friends for dinner parties where he proudly demonstrated the voice-controlled entertainment system and the automated window treatments that responded to weather conditions. The irony wasn't lost on me that Dylan's enthusiasm for technology was his path toward financial disaster. Every time he showed off a new feature to his friends, every time he adjusted the smart systems to his preferences, every time he used the premium services that came with the house, he was unknowingly racking up usage charges that would have made a luxury resort manager proud. The motion-activated security lighting that he loved for its convenience was built at $5 per activation. The premium water filtration system that delivered perfectly balanced pH levels charged $15 per gallon of processed water. The AI climate control that learned his schedule and preheated or pre-cooled the house was running 24/7 at premium service rates. But the real escalation came when Dylan discovered what heckled luxury mode on various systems throughout the house. The smart shower that could be programmed for different water pressure and temperature combinations. The kitchen appliances that offered chef-grade performance testings, the entertainment system that could create immersive audio experiences customized for different types of content. Dylan activated every premium feature he could find, treating the house like his personal technology plant, and never questioning why everything seemed so much more sophisticated than what he'd expected in his price range. Karen's housewarming party for Dylan turned into the social event of the season in Riverside Meadows. She invited the entire neighborhood, plus Dylan's friends from work, plus several people who seemed to exist solely to serve as an audience for her maternal pride. She decorated the house like it was a wedding reception, complete with a professional catering service and a hired bartender who specialized in craft cocktails. The photographer was back, of course, documenting every moment for what Karen announced would be a keepsake video that Dylan could show his children someday. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen announced during her toast, raising her champagne glass while standing in Dylan's living room like she owned the place. "Tonight we celebrate not just Dylan's achievement in home ownership, but the values that make our community special. When we work together, when we maintain our standards, when we support responsible neighbors, everybody wins." The crowd applauded and Dylan beamed with pride, completely unaware that his mother was essentially celebrating her successful campaign to acquire cheap real estate through intimidation and harassment. The professional videographer Karen had hired captured testimonials from neighbors about how much they appreciated Dylan's presence in the community, footage of him giving tours of his smart home features, and extended sequences of him using various premium services throughout the house. Karen planned to edit everything together into what she called a documentary about successful community integration, though it looked more like an expensive home movie designed to stroke her ego about her real estate negotiations. As I watched the party from across the street through my car window, I found myself almost impressed by the theatrical scope of Karen's celebration. She had turned Dylan's home ownership into a multimedia production that probably cost more than most people spend on actual home improvements. But what made the whole spectacle truly remarkable was how oblivious both of them were to the financial tsunami that was building in their smart homes. Automated billing systems, 30-day grace period, had 15 days left to run, and Dylan was using premium services at a rate that would have made a tech billionaire think twice about his monthly budget. Karen thought she had won the ultimate victory. But what she didn't realize was that she had bought her son a very expensive lesson in the importance of reading contracts carefully. The digital meters were running, the usage data was accumulating, and the first bill that would change everything was exactly 2 weeks away from landing in Dylan's mailbox. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, 32 days after Dylan had signed the closing papers, and it looked innocuous enough. Standard business envelope. Return address from Riverside Smart Solutions LLC. The kind of mail that most people would assume contained routine service information. Dylan had no way of knowing that he was holding $47,830 worth of premium service charges in his hands. I know the exact moment he opened it because I had positioned myself at the coffee shop across from his office building, monitoring the panic signals that started flooding through his internet connection. First came the frantic Google searches, smart home billing error, how to dispute utility charges, legal advice for fraudulent bills, then the rapid-fire phone calls. The first call went to his mother, naturally lasting 37 minutes and generating enough stress to trigger his fitness tracker's emergency protocols. Karen's response was everything I had hoped for. She arrived at Dylan's house within 20 minutes, screeching into the driveway like she was responding to a natural disaster. I watched from Mrs. Chen's single quotes as front porch while helping with her garden. Karen stormed through Dylan's front door with righteous fury, and the yelling started immediately. "This has to be some kind of mistake." Her voice carried through the windows. "Nobody gets a $47,000 utility bill for 1 month. This is a computer error or some kind of scam." Dylan's call came exactly 18 minutes later, and I answered with just the right amount of surprised concern. "Max speaking. Dylan, is everything okay? You sound upset." I had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, preparing for every angle they might take. The key was sounding genuinely puzzled while remaining professional about their contractual obligations. "Mac, I just got this bill for almost $50,000. Dylan's voice shook with confusion and panic. "It's from something called Riverside Smart Solutions, and it says I owe money for smart home services. I don't understand what this is or why I'm getting charged for things that should just be part of the house." In the background, Karen was coaching him, her voice rising with emotional intensity as she realized her victory might have unexpected consequences. "That's strange," I replied, pulling up the contract documents. "Let me check your service agreement." Riverside Smart Solutions handles the integrated smart home package for 1247 Maple Street. When you purchased the house, you automatically assumed responsibility for all ongoing service contracts and premium system agreements. I paused, letting that sink in while scrolling through usage reports, showing exactly how Dylan had accumulated such an impressive bill in 30 days. Karen grabbed the phone at this point, sounding ready for the legal battle of her suburban life. Mac, this is Regina Blackthorne, and I'm telling you right now that this bill is unacceptable. We are not paying $47,000 for basic utilities. And if you think you can scam me son just because he's a first-time homeowner, you have another thing coming. That's when I started reading from the actual contract. Chapter and verse. Smart thermostat climate optimization at $5 per adjustment. Total adjustments this month 412. Premium LED lighting system with circadian rhythm synchronization at $2 per hour of operation. Total hours 673. Ultra pure water filtration with mineral balancing at $15 per gallon. Total gallons processed 842. The silence grew heavier with each item, and I could hear Karen's confidence deflating. AI-powered security system with facial $50 per day. Activated continuously for 31 days. Premium entertainment pack with spatial audio optimization at $12 per hour. Total usage 208 hours. Dylan had activated nearly every premium service available, often multiple times daily, with the enthusiasm of someone new who thought he was getting luxury amenities for free. The real kicker came with the luxury mode charges. Spa-grade shower system with custom pressure and temperature control at $25 per session. Chef-grade kitchen applianceization at $15 per cooking session. Premium sleep environment control, with air purification at $30 per night. Dylan had been living like a tech-savvy millionaire, completely unaware that every convenience was being meticulously built at five-star hotel rates. Karen demanded to see the contract language authorizing these charges. Read me exactly what Dylan signed word for word, Beckers. I was there and nobody mentioned $50 daily fees for security systems. Indirected her to section 1(b) of the technical appendix subsection. For paragraph 3, where all premium service agreements were listed under integrated smart home package premium service tier automatic enrollment. It's all there, in black and white, Ak explained, reading from the document they had both signed without examining the fine print. Premium service tier includes all enhanced functionality for smart home systems with whose August billing calculated monthly according to actual consumption patterns. By signing this agreement, purchaser acknowledges understanding of all service terms and accepts responsibility for all charges incurred through system usage. Karen's response was exactly what I expected. Rage, denial, and threats of legal, all delivered at maximum volume, while Dylan sat in stunned silence, probably calculating how many years it would take to pay off a debt exceeding most people's annual salaries. But Karen tried one desperate move that backfired spectacularly. In her panic, she rushed over to Dylan's house and started frantically turning off every smart device she could find, not realizing that the emergency system shutdown protocol she triggered was billed at $200 per incident according to the disruption clause. What Karen didn't realize was that this was just the first bill, covering only 30 days of Dylan's enthusiastic exploration, and based on the real-time monitoring data I was seeing, month 2 is shaping up to be even more expensive, especially since Karen's visit had unknowingly activated several additional premium services that charged extra fees for irregular usage, patterns, and unauthorized system modifications. 3 weeks after the first bill arrived, I found myself in a courtroom watching Karen's attorney pace like a predator who had cornered his prey. Harold Brennan was one of those lawyers who specialized in making people feel stupid for signing contracts they hadn't read, and he thought this would be his easiest victory of the year. He wore his confidence like an expensive suit, gesturing dramatically toward me while addressing the judge with theatrical flair. "Your Honor, what we have here is a clear case of predatory lending disguised as a real estate transaction," Brennan announced with righteous indignation. "My clients, the Blackthorns, are hard-working community members who were deliberately deceived by sophisticated contractual languages ignorant to trap them in an exploitative billing scheme that no reasonable person could have anticipated." He paused for effect, letting his words hang like an accusation that demanded justice. Dylan sat next to his mother looking genuinely distraught, like someone who had wandered into a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He had lost weight over the past month with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights since the bills started arriving. Karen looked ready for war, dressed in a Navy power suit with jewelry that caught the light every time she moved. Her expression radiated controlled fury from someone who absolutely refused to believe she might have made a mistake. The defendant, Marcus Henderson, deliberately concealed the true nature of these service agreements, Brennan continued, waving documents toward the judge like evidence of criminal conspiracy. He used his technical expertise to create a contract that appeared standard but contained hidden clauses, generating enormous ongoing costs for essential home services. This is exactly the predatory behavior consumer protection laws are designed to prevent. Karen nodded along with every word, occasionally whispering something that made Dylan look even more immiserable. When my turn came, I walked to the podium with calm confidence and set a small digital recorder where everyone could see it. Your Honor, I understand the plaintiff's confusion and sympathize with their finances. However, before discussing smart home service agreements, I think it's important for the court to understand the true nature of this transaction and the circumstances fatal to it. I glanced at Karen, who was staring at the recorder like someone suddenly realizing they're standing in quicksand. The plaintiffs have characterized this as predatory lending and consumer fraud, but evidence shows this was a carefully orchestrated scheme by Miss Regina Blackthorne to acquire my property through intimidation and harassment. I pressed play and suddenly Karen's voice filled the courtroom, crystal clear and unmistakably discerns her plans to force me out of the neighborhood. The first clip was from 2 weeks after Dylan moved in when Karen visited to celebrate his home ownership. I'm so proud of how we handled that situation with the engineer, her recorded voice announced with satisfaction. These tech people think they're so smart, but they don't understand neighborhood politics. A little HOA pressure, some manufactured violations, and suddenly they're desperate to sell at whatever price we have. But Dylan's voice could be heard asking about violation legitimacy, and Karen's response was devastating. Oh honey, those violations were completely legitimate. Technically speaking, Karen's voice continued with the tone of Samian explaining clever business strategy. I spent months researching HOA bylaws, finding every possible infraction I could document. The grass height, trash placement, vehicle aesthetics, all real. But what made it work was timing and volume hit him with everything at once. Make fighting more expensive than selling. And suddenly our difficult neighbor becomes very cooperative. The real bombshell came next. A phone conversation between the appraiser we hired to evaluate the Henderson property. Her voice discussed deliberately undervaluing my house to make their offer seem reasonable compared to potential legal costs. We need the appraisal low and off it. Our offer looks like fair market price considering his legal situation. If the house appraises at 280, our 180 offer looks like theft. But if it appraises at 190 due to neighborhood compliance issues, then we look like we're doing him a favor. The final clip sealed Karen's fate completely. A conversation with Dylan about their investment strategy and how proud she was of teaching him about real estate opportunities from understanding neighborhood dynamics. She explained how forcing me to sell below market value was good business. Dylan's first lesson in leveraging community influence for financial gain. Her voice was warm and maternal as she described the psychological pressure campaign, complete with details about midnight surveillance and coordinated neighbor isolation tactics. Harold Brennan's confidence evaporated as the recordings played. I watched him frantically shuffle through papers like he might find precedent for defending clients. Court planning fraudulent real estate schemes. Karen's face went completely white and she kept looking around as if expecting someone to explain this was all a misunderstanding. Dylan wanted to disappear entirely, slumping in his chair as he realized his dream home was acquired through systematic harassment. Your Honor, these recordings demonstrate Miss Blackthorne engaged in deliberate conspiracy to acquire my property through pretenses and manufactured legal pressure. I continued. She abused her HOA president position to create violations serving her financial interests, coordinated with third parties to manipulate property valuations, and conducted surveillance campaigns designed to force below-market sales. This wasn't a legitimate real estate transaction. This was theft disguised as neighborhood dispute resolution. The judge listened to several more clips before asking Karen's attorney for a response. Brennan stood slowly, looking like someone who brought a knife to a gunfight. Your Honor, my clients, we would need time to review these recordings and verify their authenticity. His voice trailed off as he realized challenging recordings from security equipment. Dylan had legally agreed to what be a losing strategy, but I wasn't finished. The recordings established Karen's fraudulent intent, but I still needed to address the billing dispute regarding smart home service charges. Your Honor, every system service agreement and billing structure was disclosed in the purchase contract both defendants signed. Mr. Dylan Blackthorne has been living in a house with commercial-grade smart home technology using premium thousands to provide. Monthly bills accurately reflect actual usage calculated according to rates specified in the contract. Karen finally found her voice, standing despite her attorney's attempts to keep her seated. Your Honor, this is He deliberately hid those costs in technical language no normal person could understand, but her outrage rang hollow after recordings revealed her own deliberate deception and fraudulent schemes. Miss Blackthorne, you've just been exposed, conducting systematic fraud and harassment to acquire property below market value. The judge replied with obvious irritation. Your complaints about contractual complexity are endearmened by evidence of your sophisticated real estate manipulation schemes. The irony was perfect. Karen, who had orchestrated complex legal and psychological pressure campaigns, now claimed to be too naive to understand contracts she'd signed. But the most damaging revelation was still coming, something that would send Karen's legal strategy into complete collapse and reveal just how deep her conspiracy had gone. The final revelation came when he pulled out a second set of documents that made Karen's face go from white to green. Your Honor, There's one more aspect of this case that the court needs to understand. Miss Blackthorn's harassment campaign wasn't just about acquiring one property cheaply. Based on her recorded statements and the evidence I've gathered, she had planned to use the same tactics against at least 3 other homeowners in Riverside Meadows who she considered undesirable for any board. I handed the judge a folder containing screenshots of Karen's social media posts, email chains with other HOA board members, and in property research she had conducted on familiar she deemed unsuitable for her vision of suburban perfection. The judge spent several minutes reviewing the documents while Karen whispered frantically to her attorney, who looked like he was considering a career change. When the judge finally looked up, his expression had shifted from judicial neutrality to obvious disgust. Miss Blackthorn, these documents suggest you are operating what can only be described as a systematic real estate fraud scheme using your HOA position to target multiple property owners for financial gain. This goes far beyond a dispute. Dylan had been sitting in stunned silence throughout most of the proceedings, but this final revelation seemed to break something inside him. He stood up abruptly, looked directly at his mother, and said in a voice loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear, "Mom, what have you done to me?" The betrayal and horror in his voice were so raw that even Karen's attorney winced. "I thought I was buying my first home. I thought this was legitimate. I thought you were helping me become a responsible adult, and instead you turned me into part of some kind of criminal conspiracy." The judge's final ruling was swift and comprehensive. In the matter of Blackthorn versus Henderson, the court finds that the plaintiff obtained the property in question through fraudulent means, including but not limited to abuse of official position, manufactured legal violations, and conspiracy to manipulate property values. The service contracts in question are valid and enforceable, as all terms were clearly disclosed in the purchase agreement. Furthermore, Miss Regina Blackthorn is by ordered to pay Mr. Henderson's legal fees and court costs, and this case will be referred to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. But the real shock came when I announced the final bill total that Dylan owed for his 3 months of luxury living. Your Honor, based on Mr. Dylan Blackthorn's continued usage of premium services throughout this legal dispute, his total outstanding balance with Riverside Smart Solutions now stands at $284,750. The number hung in the courtroom air like a physical weight. It was almost exactly 100 times what Dylan had paid for the house, spread across 3 months of living. Like technology, royalty, while his legal bills mounted and his stress levels triggered even more premium services. Karen's reaction was everything I had hoped for and more. She stood up, pointed directly at me, and screamed, "You can't do this. No one is allowed to be smarter than me in my neighborhood. I've been controlling property values and community standards for 15 years, and some nobody engineer is not going to outsmart Regina Blackthorn." The outburst was so spectacularly inappropriate that the court bailiff took a step to order and the judge had to use his gavel to restore order. Dylan, meanwhile, had done the math and realized that selling the house back to me for the original purchase price of $180,000 would still leave him with over $100, or zero, in debt to the Smart Home Service Company. "Your Honor, I need to ask the court's guidance on something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I sell the house back to Mr. Henderson for what I paid, I'll still owe him more money than I make in 2 years. What am I supposed to do?" The judge's expression softened slightly as he realized that Dylan had been as much a victim of his mother's schemes as I had been. That's when I made an offer that surprised everyone in the courtroom, including myself. "Your Honor, I'm prepared to purchase the property back from Mr. Dylan Blackthorn for the full market value of $280,000, and I'll forgive the outstanding service debt in exchange for his cooperation in any criminal proceedings against his mother." The generosity wasn't entirely altruistic. I wanted my house back. I wanted Karen to face consequences for her actions, and I wanted Dylan to understand that not everyone in the world was as manipulative and self-serving as his mother had taught him to be. The aftermath of the court case was more satisfying than I had dared to hope. Karen was stripped of her HOA presidency within a week, and the board voted to conduct a comprehensive review of all rule changes she had implemented during her tenure. 3/3 homeowners came forward with stories of harassment and manufactured violations, and the district attorney's office opened an investigation into her activities. Dylan moved back in with his mother temporarily while he figured out how to rebuild his credit and his life. But he made a point of apologizing personally to every neighbor who had been affected by Karen's schemes. 6 months later, I was back living in 1247 Maple Street with all the smart home systems converted to normal residential mode, and Tom Martinez happily moved back in as my tenant. The house felt different somehow, like it had been cleansed of whatever negative energy Karen had tried to infuse into the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen brought me cookies to celebrate my return, and even the neighbors who had initially avoided me during Karen's campaign made efforts to welcome me back to the community. The money I had earned from the smart home service charges went toward establishing the Riverside Legal Defense Fund, a non-profit organization that provides free legal assistance to homeowners facing HOA abuse and property harassment. The irony of using Karen's son's money to protect future victims of people like Karen was not lost on anyone involved, and the local newspaper wrote a feature story about the case that was picked up by several national people. Dylan eventually found a modest apartment across town and got a job with a property management company where his expensive education and reading contracts carefully made him surprisingly good at protecting tenants from predatory landlords. He sent Camille a Christmas card that first year with a simple message: "Thank you for teaching that there are people in the world who fight back against bullies even when the bullies think they hold all." Theppo, Karen, meanwhile, moved out of Riverside Meadows 6 months after the court case, unable to face the daily reminder of her spectacular fall from suburban royalty to neighborhood pariah. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe Alex Stories.